You know, and just reflecting back on that conversation, I always try to measure a level of effort and a level of activity and success by the amount of failures and mistakes people make. Because if they're not making mistakes and they're not failing, then we're not moving and pushing the envelope.
I agree with that 100% there.
I'm going to first start off and thank Bobby and her staff and the CIOs out in the department and across the interagency. I'm just in awe every day at all the fantastic work that they're doing, their staffs are doing, and it's just an honor to be sitting in this role and observing all this great work.
Cool.
I'm going to start off on a topic that might seem basic, but you'll see the relevance in a moment, and that's our wireless contract. And when I first came to the department about a year ago, it's just been about a year, they were right on the cusp of implementing a wireless contract. We had gone out and done some benchmarking and realized that we had, you know, prices all over the map. All the agencies had done that. But they had put together a strategy that was really more of a broker kind of concept that you heard Joe talk about. And it allowed the vendor to actually use the GSA contracts that were available, along with brokering their own deals with the various carriers, and providing sort of the best-in-class service to the various components across the department. We implemented that, got some great pricing, actually about 36% less for the same service, in some cases more. More importantly, though, that was the beginning of our understanding of really sort of flipping around this age-old issue that we hear a lot about, which is the lowest pricing, technically acceptable issue that everyone struggles with. And it really spun that around for us. And we recognize that, you know, at some point when you start to broker, you normalize the pricing, right? Because you have barriers of entry are very low. And what really starts to rise to the top is the innovation, is what really distinguishes one vendor from the other, which is what you want, right? And you always want that care and feeding to go on constantly, and for the vendors to have a fair shot, but be able to sort of bang that up against each other constantly and really look at what's going to meet your needs from an innovation standpoint and less so from a pricing standpoint. The pricing will be there when you configure yourself in that kind of environment, but it's the innovation that really starts to rise to the top. And in this technology, obviously, that's really important. So we move along now into what we're starting to implement, which is our enterprise computing services. And this is where we're really taking that same concept on a much broader scale. It's really 3 tiers where we're taking our current computing vendors that we use and really tweaking some things to allow them to sort of operate in this open market a little bit better than they do today. And a lot of that was on us. There was barriers that we had in place that really didn't need to be in place, so we're reconstructing some things to make that easier for them to execute. But then we're putting 2 other pieces in place, and this is where we're going to broker these capabilities out into the open market with the cloud vendors, the FedRAMP cloud vendors, and allow these services to be available real time to a variety of the components. And then the third one is direct access to some of the big cloud service providers that are out there that we know people just want direct access to. And what's really important is when you configure those 3 types of dynamics, what you're giving the components is a couple of things. One, most favored nation pricing, so to speak, because the pricing will start to normalize, but giving them choices that they can access dynamically and allow them to reach into that, what we're calling the open market, what I'm dubbing the open market, and capture those computing services in a much more dynamic way. If you think about what Charlie was describing, what he is faced with, where they're looking at turning around things in a weekend, and you look at some of these other capabilities and these demands being put on these components, what we want to do at the department is lay a framework out there and then give these folks access to these various services and get out of the way. right? And
You-
so when
you
we
provide the vision.
we provide the
you-
vision, we
you-
actually provide the superstructure, you know, the contractual
Right.
superstructure, but then we give them access to this open market where they can consistently be comparing the various services against each other, having a low barrier of entry to access those capabilities. And we expect the pricing to kind of normalize. Pricing is important. That's very important to us. We expect that to be there, and we expect it to be competitive. But what's also very important is time to market and various types of innovation that these various components need to access quickly. And we need the vendor community to evolve those services. And what we really want them is to compete with each other from an innovation standpoint as much from a pricing standpoint. We feel like this framework is going to allow that to happen. We're super excited about that.
Yeah, man, it does sound exciting. So
Yeah.
I'm setting it up, putting things in place. Now, if I asked you about some lessons learned, maybe some things that you've learned along the way here that you'd pass on to some of your colleagues or whatever, that things that have helped you be successful. You've obviously have had an successful run here, you know, from a CIO at ICE up to DOJ, now at DHS. You're kind of on a roll here. So
Well,
what are some of the successes?
I always say that that's nothing more than I can't keep a job. So, but I think in this particular environment, what's really important here, and as you learn as you go, right, you try to leave the mistakes behind and take what worked and make it better. I think in this particular configuration, this is not easy stuff, right? These are complicated and sophisticated contractual mechanisms in a lot of cases, and we're breaking some ground. We're working very closely with our procurement organization, and we're in lockstep partnership with them. And I think what's very important as we all talk about sort of fail early and bite-sized pieces,
Right.
we're actually doing that with some of our contract strategies, right? We're actually prototyping some of these concepts. We're going to pilot some of these capabilities and pressure test them to make sure that they're going to meet our needs, and then we'll evolve them. So we're not talking about piloting and prototyping an application.
Right.
We're actually talking about piloting and prototyping a contract concept.
Sure.
And evolving that over time. And I guess I would suggest that taking that same agile methodology that we're now using for various applications and using that in a contract strategy way, along with the prototyping and piloting, and recognizing that it's not easy to do, but we feel like it's going to be worth it in the end.
Absolutely, terrific stuff.